Thank you so much for joining us here today and participating in what we hope will be a groundbreaking futures conference that will allow us, for the first time really, to harness the collective wisdom of this all-important crowd and create resources for those of you in our profession who are thinking about and acting on what we believe are global imperatives for the legal profession: ESG, DEI, and digital transformation. My name is Susan Hackett, and I chair the planning committee for this conference. And while I may have the honor of speaking to you today, I'm the mere representative and mouthpiece, if you will, of Michael Mills, who's the college's esteemed president, Elenide Sems, the college's president-elect, and our supportive leaders who serve as college trustees, as well as the rest of our planning committee. They are Jay Catherine McDonough, and Kat Moon. Whatever good has come into this conference is a result of their hard work to pioneer the amazing set of interactions we're about to embark on. And of course, none of this would be possible without the time, energy, and talent of our terrific college administrator, Debbie Curtis O'Connell, who's done so much to bring this event to the stage today and is truly the glue that binds this college of fellows together. One last note of gratitude: we had a number of last-minute challenges with the platform switchover and cancellations and some illnesses. So I thank everyone who answered our call to pull the proverbial stuff out of the fire and help so last minute. And these facilitators and lifesavers who stepped in, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. Now, as you know, this conference got off to its start in November, and I hope you had a chance to listen to our opening plenary session speakers, Jason Barnwell and Gina Passarelli. The video of their program is still up on the college website if you want to go back and view it some other time. Jason and Gina did a terrific job in helping us set the frame for these issues we've targeted for this conference today and to begin our pondering on our all-important topics. So thanks to Jason and Gina. But okay, enough about all those other people. Let's talk about you and what you're in for today. You know that we have programs set for the same time slot in the same format on 3 successive Tuesdays in January. This, of course, is the first, and our focus is on ESG. In our second session, next Tuesday, the 18th, we'll focus on DEI. And then finally, on January 25th, we'll shift to 4IR, which, as you know, is shorthand for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, otherwise known as digital transformation. The conference planning committee agreed that these 3 issues are truly the defining and fastest evolving issues of our time, not only because of the increasing impact they have on pretty much every aspect of our daily lives, but in how they will likely transform the way we work, the work we do, and the people and systems with whom we work and whom we serve as professionals. So I think it's fair to say that in 5 to 10 years, maybe even 2, while the changes they may bring will be incremental, they will accelerate exponentially and have enormous cross-functional impacts. I see huge transformations running head-on into a profession that has traditionally prided itself on its steadfast adherence to doing pretty much everything the way that lawyers have always done it for centuries. And if we're caught standing still or looking behind us for guidance to move forward, we may find ourselves struggling to remain relevant, nonetheless equipped to keep up, or more importantly, to lead. So that's what a futures conference is really about, isn't it? It's not about a crystal ball or divining mystical signs. It's about practical preparation to lead in a changing world. And it's my view, and I hope yours too, that the college and its members own a spot at the front of this charge. The only question is, how can we best lead? And also, how will we leverage our strengths and blaze a path forward that helps not only our constituencies, but all of our stakeholders? What has always appealed to me about COLPM and the collegial and multidisciplinary coming together of the profession's brain trust is just this fact. Okay, my brain may be the one that's labeled Abby Normal and Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein, but you all are pretty darn smart. And you influence not only people in the varied practices and places in which you work, but also the communities of clients, regulators, institutions, businesses, and professional communities in which you work, volunteer, and lead. So this conference is our chance to bring the brain trust together, and on 3 successive Tuesdays, work our way through each of these topics to begin to identify not only our general observations, but our ideas, our strategies, our experiences, and our networks that may help us to define and lead the future. The planning committee spent a lot of time working on just how we could do that, since it's a pretty tall order. And I'm pleased to tell you there wasn't too much drinking involved. But we aren't so arrogant to think that we created perfection, even though we did decide to offer a pretty unique format for you to engage in on these 3 Tuesdays. So our hope is that we'll not only offer you interesting conversations, but we'll also collect and then aggregate your best thinking into a report to offer to others. That's what we hope results from these 3 Tuesdays in January of 2022. Soon in the legal profession, at least, Tuesdays may be known for more than delicious tacos. So let's get practical and let's talk a little bit about what's going to happen today in the next 2 programs on the 18th and the 25th. On each of these days, you're going to hear 2 Spark Talks that 2 experts have recorded for us to help you warm up to the subjects and to get our juices flowing. And then you're going to move into breakout sessions of about 10 to 15 people each. Each session has a facilitator with detailed instructions on how to help your group engage on a series of assigned questions. After the first session, which lasts for about an hour, there'll be a break of about 30 minutes, during which time you can step away, or you can network with your college by selecting the lobby on the event page. And then we'll reconvene for another hour with the same groups and the same facilitators. At the end of that time, you're welcome to once again return to the lobby to chat and to catch up with your colleagues from across the college. Now, if you're like me, you may want to switch your event view on your screen on the left nav bar to where it says sessions, because it will make it far more easy for you to select sessions when the time comes. A couple of notes on the logistics. As you can see, we're on Zoom events for our show, and we thank the Zoom folks who've been so helpful in getting this together for us. We moved to this platform in order to give you better control over the process of joining and rejoining sessions as you like over the next 3 days of programs for these 3 days in January. So when it comes time for breakouts or for networking in the lobby, you simply click on the link for the place you want to go from the list of events options on the conference homepage. Thus, when it's breakout time, you'll need to have your breakout group assignment that you were supplied via the email sent to you by the college with the Zoom link that you're using today and other info. There are 11 groups, each with a session A for the first discussion time, and then with a session B for the second discussion time. When the discussion groups are beginning, click the link for your assigned group, and remember, Zoom will not be automatically sorting you to your assigned room. You do it yourself. If you don't have your group number in hand, you have easy access to that email that we sent you with your assignment information. Debbie has put a link in the assignments to those assignment pages in the chat box on the events page. You'll be with the same discussion group and facilitator for both of the sessions this afternoon. And when you return next week and the following week, we'll be using the same discussion format, and you'll be old pros at this process. But you will have different group assignments each week to assure you get to spend time with a different crew each time we meet. Now, once in your discussion sessions, your facilitators are going to guide you through the conversation, but they are not your substance leaders. Each of you is co-responsible for the substance. You'll be offered a link in the chat box for your discussion group when you get there that allows you to open a shared Google Jamboard for your group. Jamboards allow you to record comments and ideas on a shared doc with all of your discussion mates in real time, and also while you're conversing via the Zoom. So you'll open your Jamboard on a separate screen or tab, and each group's Jamboards will be left open after the conference for about a month, so that if you're inspired, you can return to your Jamboard and add another comment, or connect a document, or reread what was offered in recording. So keep your Jamboard link if you like, so you can return. Your first and second conversation groups will be on separate sets of questions. In your first session, those A sessions, you'll be asked to broadly consider, define, discuss, and opine on the issue of ESG generally. Thus, all of the questions begin with the request to consider, something. In your second sessions after the break, you'll be asked to imagine. You'll take your general thoughts collected in the first discussion and start to apply them to specific situations in which you're asked to imagine a solution or a process or a framework for implementing ESG-related priorities. So by the end of the sessions, hopefully you will have built or created something interesting that may not exist, or ideas that can be practically hung from existing frameworks, all based on your experience and your common goals and interests in leveraging change. Consensus on all points or answers are not what we're seeking. We're looking for a variety of views and paths that could be valuable to others in navigating change from the variety of places, and that's what we hope to capture. So as you interact in your groups, one note, please abide by our discussion group rules, what some call Vegas rules and others may call Chatham House rules. What happens in the discussion room stays in the discussion room. What we're working on here is not for attribution. We're recording these general sessions, but we will not be recording the Zoom calls for your session breakouts for this very reason. We want you to promote candid and robust conversations amongst yourselves. Thus, we also ask that you not capture or copy the Jamboard or share specifics of the discussion with others. You're welcome to talk about your experience generally and share the big takeaways on social media or when you return to the office and want to apply your learnings. But please remember to respect not only the no attribution rule, but the intention of the college to put all of these conversations together and issue our own report. So don't share the results of your conversation in a manner that scoops us or that bypasses the reporting process to draw together the thinking of all 11 groups before we put our name on it. So with all this in mind, we hope you'll have fun exploring these issues, and we encourage you to collegially share your wisdom with each other. We will return to you after this entire set of conference programs is done to seek your advice and direction, your assistance, edits, and ideas for drafting our report to the profession. And there will be many ways to contribute, and frankly, much to be done. The report will be live online so that it will continue to be improved and expanded as these issues and your needs unfold. So for many of us, while the conference has been a once-a-year interaction with COLPM, I hope that's about to change. What we're asking you, the fellows of the College of Law Practice Management, is to engage like never before. And when we're done with all the Zooming on January 25th, it won't be the end of our Futures Conference, but the foundation for a new beginning. This is an amazing organization and collection of talented and influential leaders. So I hope that today and the next 2 Tuesdays will help us realize and share our potential with those with whom we work, as well as those whom we serve. So with that, please let me introduce our first Spark Talk featuring David Alfrey of Clifford Chance. I met David after being recommended to him, and I want to give a big hat tip to college fellow Daniel Smallwood and Catherine McDonough. David is a lawyer who is with Clifford Chance in London and a member of the firm's global ESG board, ESG board, I meant to say. He'll tell you a lot more about all of that in his talk, since he is, of course, a talented and sought-after advisor to his clients on ESG-related matters. But I want to tell you that he's also a lot more than that. He lives and breathes ESG principles in a unique way via the foundation he's built to build a more humane global sports community and through his extensive leadership as a pro bono volunteer and human rights advocate. He's lived in Pakistan, Dubai, and now London, but he works to implement his vision around the world. So I am pleased to welcome to the stage to kick off today's ESG topic, David Alfrey.
Hi everyone, my name is David Olivery, and I'm a lawyer with Clifford Chance. I'm based in London in the litigation and disputes resolution practice. I also have the honor of being a member of our global ESG board. My background, in brief, is as a governance and human rights lawyer. I have advised the likes of the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, or the TNFD, the Centre for Sport and Human Rights, CSHR, and a number of large banks and asset managers on matters relating to ESG and beyond. For the next few minutes, I plan to lay before you a number of challenges that have excited challenged lawyers and practitioners in ESG through 2021, and which offers significant opportunity for us to tackle, structure, and synthesize throughout 2022. This talk offers insight, but is a spark that I hope provides flame for the discussions to follow. I therefore also take the opportunity to sort these into three broader themes. The first, a just and necessary transition to energy independence. Second, trade, Suez Canals, SIPs, CBAMs, and us. And third, diversity, bio, people, perspectives, and solutions. Now, I admit it probably isn't fair to say three themes and then give you a mini drop-down list, but let's use these as a starter for 10 and see how it goes. So the first, a just and necessary transition to energy independence. The Paris Agreement, in a preambulatory clause, introduced the concept of a just transition, whilst creating an agreement that would finance sustainable development. In 2021, the Glasgow Pact changed the conversation from net zero to net zero resilience. Before we proceed, can we all take a second to recognize the achievement of these agreements? Unanimous agreement by all signatories. Incredible. More incredible is that we have matured to recognize that the mathematical net zero is not enough, and that we need to add the people component, the resilience. I was born in Pakistan, in Karachi, and we had frequent power outages. I would study by candlelight, but worse, hospitals couldn't stay powered on. An independent report from ADBI, working paper 1024, reports that in 2018, fuel imports were around $14.5 billion. The $3.5 billion rise from the preceding year was due in 75% part from the rise in energy prices and 25% from the rise in volume. Now, you might see where this is going. With fully renewable grids, countries like Pakistan can immediately free themselves of reliance upon fossil fuel providers, and instead reinvest those funds and potential energy export revenues into healthcare and food security. Transition is necessary, but is there a trade-off? Yes, several. Energy independence and green energy, however, must be achieved in a way that is sustainable. People and nature together must be provided for as part of these financing structures. A just transition is a risk and an opportunity. It is an opportunity to provide new skills, employment, education, to relocate people to more arable and climate resilient land, to respect and uphold and strengthen indigenous rights. This in parallel to benefiting nature and biodiversity. The challenge? Well, what is the revenue stream for social benefit? Who bears the cost where there is no revenue? This challenge exists both in transition in and transition out. So let's talk about real-world opportunities for financing necessary but not always profit-making ventures. Let's be creative about blending finance and structures, and let's see if we can find a solution that is in keeping with the Glasgow Pact. And that brings us to the second challenge: trade, Suez Canal, SIPs, CBAMs, and us. I introduced myself as a human rights and governance lawyer. This is where ESG really gets fun for me. Supply chains are fundamental to global trade. This ranges through from minerals that are extracted to household items. Typically, this is relevant to corporate enterprises and those invested in it. With new swathes of regulation on director duties and on disclosure obligations, supply chains need to be more informed and transparent. Tech is a necessary ally here. However, what happens when the cost of due diligence goes up? Worse, what happens when we layer on the cost of carbon taxation and similar border adjustment mechanisms? Historically, rising costs have been a key driver for changing practices in global trade. This could lead to divestment and relocation of manufacturing. This, however, does not solve the human rights and other issues that exist and that have been perpetuated through activity of enterprise. So we need to find a solution. There are, of course, other drivers to trade, and some of these were identified by the American Association for Advancement of Science in a paper in 2019 titled Sensitive Intervention Points in the Post-Carbon Transition, or SIPs. One obvious one would be changes to subsidy structures. Another is changes to political drivers such as fiscal policy and tax incentives, and of course in demand for goods and services. The impact of any of these and other drivers, the paper argues, can be exponential. Therefore, trade policy, border adjustments are also fundamental in the transition. The challenge: how much is too much? Where does a policy become anti-competitive? And how are we ensuring that risks for future litigation and challenge are mitigated where enterprises are retreating rather than resolving issues? And what is a good subsidy? The final layer, and one I would argue might be the most important, governance, specifically diversity. Biodiversity, diversity of people, diversity of perspective, diversity in solutions. Governance, in my mind, sits as a wrapper around the E and the S, and frankly, any other concerns, anti-money laundering, anti-bribery and corruption, compliance. However, what we need to remind ourselves about are the fundamental principles of good governance, which can be summarized as accountable, independent, transparent, inclusive, and participatory. This is not a nice to have. This is necessary to deal with the challenges of ESG. Diversity is commonly placed in the S, however, remains an issue in E, biodiversity and nature-based solutions, in G, as a need to ensure we have engaged all stakeholders. So I push the envelope here, but I argue that we need to be ready to ensure that the diversity in the room adds to the decision-making globally so that we can achieve diversity in the solutions. Now, this encourages us to look to nature-based solutions, to learn from the heritage and skill of the indigenous populations, to learn from and keep engaged with the most vulnerable of our communities and those communities in which we operate in and with. As we learn to love and value nature once more, we need also to remember that nature is most healthy in diversity. Monocultures never last very long, and that is the degree of systemic inclusion and diversity we should strive for. But of course, we are lawyers, so let's not forget that with a carrot, there is also a stick, and that the opportunity to remember the impending regulation, in particular in the mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence, due in draft in February in the EU. Let us remember that shareholder and employee activism demand that decision-making is transparent and accountable. The Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, replacing the Non-Financial Reporting Directive, create double materiality reporting at the board level. Cases such as those of Akpabi, Miller Defense, Urgenda remind us also that the courtrooms are aligned with the courts of public opinion. But what does this all mean? Simply, the corporate structuring and separation are being challenged. Political and cyclical ambitions of states and boards equally needs realignment from Friedman economics of profit only to ESG. Corporation and financial success can be and needs to be driven from value creation at an E and S level. Does this mean we turn all CSR budgets into ESG budgets and that all corporations are social enterprises? Absolutely not. Democratic and capitalist economies are perfect for driving the transition. Profit is defined as the money that is earned in trade and business after paying the cost of producing and selling goods and services. I will not be the first to remind us for the need to recognize the impact on climate, nature, and communities as costs and earnings. How different the conversation might be if we replaced money with value in that definition. Instead, perhaps a commercial consideration. What is the cost of not acting versus the cost of introducing transition measures? As a lawyer, I am proud to remind us of litigation, the complaints through the OECD national contact points, and all other forms of dispute resolution. As a lawyer, we are done being neutral. To conduct our roles more fully, we must be ready to call out risks that go beyond black letter law and recognize the impacts from consumer demands and stakeholder activism. Before the screen fades out, I hope I can leave you with one last thought. Lawyers have for years been critical to pioneering some of humanity's greatest successes and creating some of the most incredible businesses and technologies. Let's not wait for a bat signal before we assume our responsibility to our clients, our businesses, their stakeholders, and our own families and friends in the work that we do to build a world that has no kids reading by candlelight and no doctors operating without energy, with nobody relocated to flood-risk zones, so we can build a dam. Food enough to feed everyone, and nature enough to stop us flying to see it.
Thank you very much, David, for that inspiring talk. Our thanks also for setting out the vision that will allow us to start thinking big, to start thinking globally, if you will, about each of these issues and how they're interconnected, not only with others and everything we do, but also to the topics we'll be focusing on for our next 2 Tuesdays, diversity and digital transformation. Our second Spark Talk has been designed to take some of these universal elements in the ESG conversation that David highlighted, and then apply them into the legal profession and our daily working environment. Our speaker will focus her comments on the law firm world in which she regularly works, but I urge us as members of the professional community's multidisciplinary ecosystem to think about how her comments apply to all of us in all of our work settings, in legal departments, law schools, law companies, consulting practices, tech companies, and more. And as professionals whose training includes law, management, communications, sales, executive leadership, technology, and finance. We have broad influence across society and with the many people we touch. So let's focus on how we can use it. Thus, I asked Pam Cohn to join us to talk about this topic more directly and how it interacts with our daily work and interactions with others. Pam is the founder and CEO of Amity Advisory, which specializes in ESG, social impact, and sustainability consulting for legal and other professional service firms. Pam's background includes time spent on the staff of several major law firms, as CMO and as Director of Client Services, as well as a leading role as a global social impact and sustainability officer for an advisory firm. She speaks extensively on this topic to law firm leaders in addition to her consulting practice. So please join me in welcoming Pam to our stage.
Material matters. Material matters. You might be asking yourself, material matters? What the heck is she talking about? I thought this talk had to do with ESG, environmental, social, and governance topics. What is she talking about, material matters? First, let's define material. There are definitions both as a noun and as an adjective, and we're going to focus on the adjective. Important, essential, relevant. Some synonyms are significant, major, of consequence, consequential, momentous. Second, let's define matter or matters. Again, there are definitions as both a verb and a noun. Number one, an affair or a situation under consideration, a topic, like the individual projects or pieces of work you do for clients. We call those matters. Number two, be of importance or have significance. Synonyms are consequence, significant, of note. So what does the phrase material matters have to do with the legal profession and with ESG? To me, the answer is obvious. We as a profession and as an industry can no longer play around the edges. Our partners, our clients, our employees, indeed all of our stakeholders expect so much more. We must focus on material matters. The pandemic has laid bare many of the shortcomings of society, which we have conveniently ignored for far too long. That there are tremendous inequities in society, racial, gender, ethnic, economic, you name it. That health is not a personal issue alone, but rather a public issue, and indeed, during a pandemic, a global issue. And recent weather events and natural disasters have made so apparent the ramifications of the climate crisis, again, which we have conveniently ignored for decades. The way we have always done things is not sustainable. And I don't just mean in the green sense of the word sustainable or sustainability. Unfortunately, that word has been co-opted to mean things only climate related. But the original meaning is much broader. When I say sustainable or sustainability, I really mean viable or viability. The way we have been conducting business for our entire lifetimes is not sustainable and is not viable going forward. The phrase or label corporate social responsibility has also been co-opted. Originally, it actually meant what companies do to ensure a robust and healthy society in how they conduct their business. Unfortunately, over the decades, it has devolved to mean charitable giving, volunteering, and recycling, all side activities to the actual business itself. Unfortunately, CSR was delegated and relegated to a side committee of interested employee volunteers to work on stuff that eventually and ultimately had nothing to do with the business. You cannot undertake a few side activities managed by a committee of employee volunteers over here and expect that to compensate for all the bad your business is doing in society over here. So the movement is moving beyond sustainability to viability and beyond CSR to the more strategic and holistic ESG. The phrase or acronym ESG started in the investment industry. These categories, environmental, social, and governance, were the areas of scrutiny for private equity, investors, and investment banks to assess companies to determine whether to invest. And the term is now being used to assess and evaluate all companies to determine their performance on these factors. I once heard it described as ESG equals the value of a company, CSR equals the values of a company. We now realize that these two terms must be inextricably intertwined. Investment banks, private equity, pension plans are all being assessed and evaluated on their own ESG, but perhaps more importantly, on the ESG impact of the companies they invest in. This assessment, from a carbon perspective at least, is referred to as financed emissions. In other words, it is not enough for those investment banks to espouse their own ESG programs and yet invest in fossil fuel companies, or in companies engaged in slave labor, or companies without appropriate diverse representation. Society is realizing that the real impact of an investment bank is not in its own practices, but is in those companies and industries and practice they deem worthy of investment. Those companies and industries and practices that they prolong and promote with their dollars. But that's the investment industry. That doesn't have anything to do with law firms, does it? After all, law firms are privately held, at least so far, and we don't have to worry about attracting investment dollars. We don't have a large carbon footprint. We don't extract resources from the earth. We don't have smokestacks, nor do we dump waste into the river. All of that is true, but our obligation to society goes way beyond our own entities, way beyond our own four walls. It is no longer sufficient for a law firm to simply reference its volunteering, its charitable giving, or its notable pro bono program. It is no longer sufficient to recycle paper and put in LED lights in your office, nor to have a siloed DEI program which focuses solely on numbers and doesn't actually address firm culture, behaviors, or implicit biases. While those programs and efforts are important, they are woefully insufficient in moving the needle. We don't let manufacturers disregard the impact of their actual business on society and on the environment, and rather celebrate their annual social responsibility report, which addresses only their charitable efforts, their volunteer days, and their recycling programs. Why then do law firms think they can do that? There are very few law firms who actually discuss their client work in their annual social impact and sustainability report. The greatest societal impact of any given law firm is through the work it does for clients. Let me repeat that. The greatest societal impact of any given law firm is through the work it does for clients. And it may surprise you, and perhaps should alarm you, that on a call in early December of lawyers from around the globe, there was talk of lawyered emissions. Just as investors get assessed on financed emissions, this conversation was exploring the emissions of the clients of law firms and what those law firms were doing to help curb those emissions, or what they were doing. Were they doing everything legal to prolong and protect those practices? Law firms are being assessed on whether they are helping clients transition to a more sustainable, viable future, or rather, are they working to maintain the status quo? I often get the question, do clients really care? If your firm has not yet received a request from clients to complete the EcoVadis survey or the Carbon Disclosure Project, now called CDP, the Supply Shift Questionnaire, or another one called Integrity Next, consider yourself lucky. That means you and your firm have time to prepare. Because yes, your clients care. We are at a tipping point in society. This is our moment to focus on material matters. This is our opportunity. Some would say this is our obligation. No single law firm will solve societal problems, but there is no profession better suited to lead society in solving its problems. Society needs us to lead. Our clients need us to lead. So I challenge you to discuss your firm's ESG without mentioning your charitable donations, your volunteering, nor your pro bono program. Rather, focus on your firm's client work that is moving the needle in addressing society's most pressing challenges. What is your firm doing that is material? What work are you doing that matters as we emerge from this pandemic? Describe your firm's material matters. That, after all, is what ESG is all about.
Thank you, Pam. And again, thank you, David. All right, so are you all ready for material matters? I certainly am. Let's go. We are running about 10 minutes behind, so your first session is starting a little bit later than the 30 minutes after the hour that we had assigned. So you may decide with your group if you'd like to add a few minutes of the conversation or take a little bit less time in the lobby at the end, or whether you want to end your convo on time and leave more time to network and take your break. But now it's time to select your breakout session from the list offered on the event page. Again, you may want to go to that left nav bar and choose sessions to navigate more easily to those groups. Remember that you are selecting the number of your group for their A session. And after you complete this round of discussion in about an hour or a little bit less, you'll have your 30-minute break and return to the same numbered group from the list of sessions marked with B for your final hour of conversation this afternoon. Enjoy your time with your peers and dig deep into this topic. And again, my thanks. And on behalf of COLPM's leadership, thank you for joining us for our 2022 Futures Conference.